Hey, everybody, I want to give you a shocking statistic. Are you sitting down? Did you know, according to research, only 15%, I'm going to repeat that, only 15% of employees feel motivated at work. Would you like to know how to get and stay motivated at work? Would you like to know how to help other people get and stay motivated at work? Stay tuned for 6 tips on how to motivate employees in the workplace. Hey, this is Shawn Doyle, CEO of Shawn Doyle Training. I'm a speaker, a book author, a trainer, and executive coach. And we have with us.
I'm Pamela Sumner, and I am your VP of Learning and Development at Shawn Doyle Training. And just really excited to talk about, again, such an important concept.
Oh,
Yeah.
so important. And I meet a lot of people at parties and social events, and I go, "Where do you work?" And they're like, and they tell me what they do, and I'm like, "How do you like it?" "Hate it. My boss is," and they just litany of complaints. And I'm like, "Well, why is this?" And I think it's because leaders are failing in companies across the world in understanding how to motivate employees. So we're going to give you today 6 tips on employee motivation. And Pamela and I teach this concept all of the time in classrooms and webinars. And it seems simple, but it's not simple because it's something that you have to do consciously every single day. So we're going to start out with tip number one. Over to you, Pamela. What's tip number one? How do we motivate employees?
I think to start out, the first tip I would land is you have to know the difference with your people between what is their how they do what they do and their why they do it.
Oh,
And I utilize this consistently. I love to listen to words that people speak, and I'll give you those in just a second. But so let me just explain it at a high level. What are the differences between the how and the why, and how do they impact motivation? How people do what they do is largely things that they're drawn to through temperament, if that makes any sense. The American Medical Association has a stat that they've put out there, and it is with regards to how people preference to do what they do. 68 to 72% of our natural talents, right, come through temperament, which means we're born with a lot of that stuff. I mean, that leaves a third or better for us to kind of develop. But where I'm going to go backwards here is I'm going to say motivation, how you deliver it is important. But as you think about what you need to deliver, which is the why you would deliver it, that's more important, Shawn. And so I always listen for, as I described, words that people will use, and they're giving me what their motivators are. So listen, my first tip here is going to be listen for words when they say things like, well, in my opinion, or what I like to see happen, the things that drive me, I'm influenced by, my perception of that is. So the why people do what they do, it's my beliefs, it's my values. I mean, all of those things, they are telling you why they do what they do. And that is so much more foundational than how. Because it's their drivers, it's their motivators, and it's the stuff that you as a leader need to really be tuned into to know how to motivate.
well, Pamela, that's a powerful tip. So tip number one is make sure to listen for the words, right? And it's so important because now you want to understand what all that's about. So that's really great. So tip number two is know them, and always say, you should know who they are. Are they married? Do they have a spouse? What does their spouse do? Do they have children? Do they have a dog? Do they have a cat? It all seems remarkably benign, but it's really important to know them. But I take that a step further. When I say know them, you want to ask them. This is a question that most leaders never ask, by the way. What are your goals? Short-term, mid-term, and long-term. What are your goals, short-term, mid-term, and long-term? Now, when I was at Comcast, I was a VP of Learning and Development, and I took over a large team. And when I would have the first meeting with an employee, right, who was on my team, they would come in my office and they'd sit down and they'd go, am I in trouble? I'd go, no, you're not in trouble. Did I do something wrong? I'm like, no. Why am I here? You need to relax. I just want to talk to you. Like, what about? I'm like, I just want to get to know you. So I'd sit back and I'd say, well, I'm just curious. Tell tell me a little bit about, yourself. Right? Great, excellent. Well, tell me a little bit about what are your goals professionally, short term, midterm, and long term. And I had one lady sit back in her seat and she said, what? And I repeated the question, and she said, I'm sorry, Shawn. I've been working for 50 years at work. I've been at work for 50 years. Nobody's ever asked me that question. No one, ever. I'm like, what is going on here? Why shouldn't you ask that question? Because then, again, we're talking about motivation, right? So if we're not motivating an employee, you tell me what your goals are, and I go, well, I'm going to help you get there. Now, are you motivated? Yeah, because it's about you, not about me. So if I make it about you, and you say, I want to be this or that, I'm like, well, so he says to me, I want to be the CEO. I'm like, well, right now you're an administrative person, but that's great. That's a great goal. So let's do this. There's a gap analysis, right? What are your competencies? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? Here's what we're going to do. Starting today, we're going to start developing those skills so that you in the future can be the CEO. How are they going to feel? They're going to feel great because you're helping them get where they want to go. So that's tip number 2 is know them, meaning know what their hopes and dreams are.
People are motivated for their reasons, not yours.
Not ours.
And, when you hire people, I think even, hire them or you're supporting their growth in your organization, motivation and how they are motivated is such a powerful piece as you just described it. And, my next tip is when you're attentive to that, what you're doing is you're increasing productivity and efficiency. But maybe most importantly, and this is more of a brief tip, is you're going to enhance their creativity and their innovation. When you get to know people, as Shawn just described, suddenly they have more of a comfort level. And some people just are never going to come up with that stuff if they don't feel comfortable. But if they feel motivated, part of that comes with a comfort level to say, have we as an organization ever thought about XYZ, boss? Have we ever, and they're going to start sharing and being more involved. They become a much more trustworthy employee for you.
I love that. So tip number 3 is if they're comfortable and motivated, they're going to be more productive and more creative and be more willing to be forthcoming with ideas and concepts. Well, that's a powerful one. Because I think, there are some environments that leaders create where people go, well, you say, well, why didn't you say anything? Why I didn't feel comfortable saying anything. I'm like, why not? Because you didn't make them feel comfortable, right? They didn't speak up in a meeting. They didn't make a suggestion. They didn't take initiative because they felt like they didn't have permission.
Yes.
So I think that's such a powerful point. That's wonderful. So tip number 4 is to thank them. And I'm amazed at how many people I've talked to across the world who said, my manager never thanks me. The only time I hear from my manager is when I do something wrong. I used to write these note cards when I was a VP of Learning and Development and had a big team. So I had a little 3x5 note card. Dear Pamela, thank you so much for your great work at the national meeting. There's no doubt that the national meeting was great because of your efforts. Thank you so much, Shawn. Pamela, I would go down to their office 2 years later, and what did they have posted on their wall in their cube? That note. Now, it's a piece of cardboard, for gosh sakes, but it wasn't the cardboard. It was the fact that someone took the time, effort, and energy to literally write a note to thank them, right? And it's interesting because when employees feel motivated, they show a 20% improvement in productivity. And so, think about this. This is a tip that seems so simplistic, but take time to thank people. Send them an email and give them a verbal compliment. Send them a note, right? Whatever it is. But, even something as simple as, hey, Pamela, boy, I tell you, it was a tough week. I know it's a tough week for all of us, right? Yeah, it was. I was like, well, I want to let you know something. I really appreciate your hard work. They're going to walk out of there floating on a cloud because you took the time. Now, here's another cool tip. Leave them a voicemail late at night for them to get the next day. Hey, this is Shawn. I'm in Dallas, and I know it's really late, and you're not going to get this till tomorrow, but I was sitting here thinking about everything you've accomplished, and I'm so proud of you. So proud of
Top
you.
of mind is motivating. Top of mind.
Yeah, and then another quick aside on a personal level, I write my wife a love note every day.
Yeah. Ah,
And it
she's
might be a
so
little
lucky.
sticky note, it might be a piece of paper, whatever, but I write her a love note every single day. Now, sometimes people say, well, why would you do that? She married you, she knows that you love her. I'm like, yeah, but isn't it nice to be reminded?
Yes.
So, friends and family, when you go home tonight, say to your wife or your husband or your partner or your spouse, whoever, say, you know what? I really appreciate you. Thank you for all that you do. They will light up like a Christmas tree
Yeah.
because that's what people need. They need to get acknowledgement. They need to be thanked. They need to be acknowledged for their work. So it's pretty interesting stuff.
Makes me think about how frequently we have to be reminded to motivate our best employees, because we actually, as with family, it becomes such a simple reliance that we sometimes can abuse them, not in a meaningful way, but the fact that, hey, I need you to do XYZ, but they don't get as much of our time. They don't get as much explanation. They don't get, that we assume a lot, and that's a little dangerous.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because the superstars get more work and get less compliments.
Absolutely.
They'll often say to me on a break, they're like, well, I'm a superstar in my department, but my manager just keeps loading me down with projects. I'm like, that's because you're good.
Yeah.
What about the other people?
The more you do, the more you get. That's not motivating, is it?
What about the other folks? Like, that's a really good point. Maybe your manager should think about that. So that's a really good one. So Pamela, tip number 5. What are your thoughts?
I think you have to also think about how people like to be rewarded. Okay. And there's this simplicity and that's out there. If you ask somebody what they want, the psychology behind that is, I'm going to put something tangible at you. And I wish I had a $20 bill to hold up here right now, but I don't. But they frequently will tell you it's money. And because money is, it's physical. I can hold it, I can spend it, I can roll it up, whatever I want to do with it. And so a lot of times when you ask people how they're motivated, and I'm not saying they're not motivated by money, right? But it typically, when people are comfortable and have a salary and they are able to make their bills paid, they start looking at other things, and those things are much more internal. And this is what I'm describing as some of Ken Blanchard's work, Bob Nelson's work. Also, Gallup has done a ton in this. But when you get a supervisor to say what motivates my people, and you get the people to say what motivates me, your front line, surprisingly, those lists are often very different. The supervisor will say money, time off, whatever, benefits, those kinds of things. And frequently, when the frontline people are being honest, they're going to say appreciation, being heard, able to make a contribution. So their stuff is going to be a little softer, right? So we need those alignment conversations.
That's a great point. And it's funny because all the research shows that money as a reward for motivation is short-lived. Somebody gets a raise, in today's world, 3%, whoop-de-doo, yay. Get a 3% raise on the annual review, and they go, this is awesome. Then they get the first check. After that, they're like, oh, I've always made that. But it's very short-lived. And so all the research shows money doesn't even show up on the list. Ironically, it's all the things that Pamela just said. Things like, opportunity for advancement. Things like, making a contribution, feeling that, all those things. So it's interesting psychology. If you get a chance to check it out, there's a great TED Talk by Daniel Pink. He wrote the book Drive about what really motivates people. And he talks about that a lot in the TED Talk, about what really motivates people. And it's kind of surprising. We have clients all over the country. So, well, if we could just give our folks out in the warehouse a raise, boy, they would just be so motivated. I'm like, I think you're chasing the wrong thing there. That's not the problem. Which leads to tip number 6, creating a motivational environment. Now, this is a very complex tip, but what are all the things you do to create a motivational environment? Things like when somebody first starts, do they get an orientation? Do they know where they're going? Do they know what their job is? All those kinds of things. Is there a reward and incentive program in place in the company? There's a whole list of things, but to create a motivational environment, with rewards and incentives and events, for example, I'll give you an example is an event. Okay, you have an employee appreciation event. You say, we're going to all go see a minor league baseball game on, Tuesday night. And you buy tickets for everybody, you have hot dogs and soda and all that. And you think, well, that's not a big deal. But, people talk about that for a very long time, number one. Number two, employees will get to bond with each other socially outside of work. And they'll say, boy, this is amazing. Like I've heard of people that work for companies where they have a family day at an amusement park and they buy everybody tickets. They're like, we went on Saturday to Hershey Park and our company paid for it. How awesome is that? That's part of creating a motivational environment. Now there's probably 20 elements to that, but at least start to investigate it. How do I create a motivational environment where people can, here's a key word, decide to be motivated. Decide to be motivated. So it's a really important point.
It's amazing what a dozen donuts will do.
I know. And you think you brought in gold doubloons. You're like, wow, you brought in donuts. This is amazing.
I like a donut, so I get it.
Who does it? Who does it, right? It's amazing. I was at one company, it was Microsoft actually in Seattle doing training. And I walked outside the training room. It was a Friday. And I walked outside the training room and Pamela, there's boxes like to the ceiling of donuts. And there was a person there at the table and I'm like, what is this? Oh, Friday's donut day. I'm like, what? You just come out here and then they bring in all these Krispy Kreme donuts and everybody gets a donut or two on Friday. And they were so excited about it. They had donuts and coffee on Friday. It's like, the real cost of that is pretty minor, but the result of the impact of that is pretty major.
It truly is.
Interesting to think about. Yeah, who doesn't love a donut? So now we're to our bonus tips. Tip number one. What are your thoughts, Pamela? What would be tip number one for motivating employees? Something that we haven't talked about that people would be like, that's a really good one.
I would say don't underestimate how much you're being watched. And one of the key components with that is as you deliver on motivation, one of the things that you really want to be attentive to is that people will mirror the message that you put out, right? And so, as you're attentive and you're building motivation and recognizing who is on your team and where the strengths are, what they like, they're being attentive to it too. So the consistency, the respect piece, I think it fosters a cohesiveness that where people become more of a team, right? In that environment, and their motivations start to align. Motivation is purpose, and you want lots of different talents in how people do what they do, and you want some alignment in why they do it, which is motivation.
That's so good. Yeah. And that tip about, being attentive to what you're doing, I call that the manager is the mirror.
Yes.
They do find that people mirror what you do. I'll give you
They absolutely do. You park in the handicap spot without a permit, they may park there.
Exactly.
And judge you. So it's not real motivating.
If you're sarcastic, they'll be sarcastic, right?
Yes.
I have an example of that. I was speaking at a client, a big conference, and I was, one of the keynotes. I was talking about motivation, but I went down to the gift shop early in the morning to the hotel, and there was a woman in there from England, and she said, "Excuse me." I said, "Yeah." She said, I sprained my ankle last night. I'm looking for some painkiller, and I don't know these things, Advil and, all these different brand names, right?" She said, "What would you recommend?" And I said, "Well, this one is ibuprofen." "Ah, okay." And this one is acetaminophen. "Ah, okay. I didn't know the brands." So I helped her out, right? Well, don't you know, I go down to the keynote, who's sitting on the front row? That woman. So I'm talking about being motivated and being kind and treating people well. And she's sitting there just beaming because she's like, that's the guy who helped me this morning.
That's a beautiful story.
So it's like I'm modeling, what I'm trying to teach people to do. And so I try to live the message. So I think that's such an important one.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing, bonus tip number two is give people opportunities. So we're using an opportunity as a motivational tool. Say somebody say, you know what? I think you're brilliant. I think you're absolutely so talented. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to manage our national meeting. And they're like, me? I get you. You got the talent, you got the skills. I'm going to help you. I'm going to support you. But I really like you to take on this task because I really feel like it will help you. I know you wanted to be a manager in the future. This can help you develop a lot of skill sets we've already talked about. So see, now we're aligning that opportunity for motivation. We're also aligning that opportunity for their future growth. And we're also we're creating a developmental opportunity. So like Pamela talked about earlier, rather than just money, try to create opportunities. Hey, there's this big conference coming up. I know you'd learn a lot from. I'd like to send you as a representative of the company. Reward, opportunity, education, training, all in one. And how amazing is that? So think of opportunity as a motivational lever or a motivational tool.
Absolutely. It's highly so.
So tip number 3, Pamela, what do you think? What would be the one that we don't want to do?
Let's see. And I want to go kind of full circle and bring it back to where you started. And, the key component, I think, with motivation is to make sure you're having those conversations. Whether it's the one-on-ones that you're doing with your team members, but, really get to know them. Plan those sessions out. Write yourself some questions so you don't get distracted and, pulled over to the side on a whole different conversation. So plan it out, go through it. Ask them, tell me about what projects you do during the day that you enjoy the most, tell me about some additional talents that you feel you have that I'm not aware of, share with me a time when you did X, Y, Z. And I mean, you want to have, as you described in the beginning, again, full circle, Shawn, is, it's not all the down and dirty stuff all the time. It's where do we see ourselves? Where do we want to go? You want to motivate people? Motivate them the way that they want to be motivated.
Yeah, well, that's such a great point. It's such a great final point. You and I do this sessions all the time. Manager's Guide to Motivating Employees. And what I think is interesting is at the end, when we ask people to create an action plan, invariably, in a large percentage of those managers' action plans, they say, I need to start meeting with my people on a regular and consistent basis. And I'm like, great idea. And I'm like, they weren't before. Like, I can't believe, because people tell me, I only meet with my manager to do project updates or when I'm in trouble, but they don't have regularly scheduled developmental conversations with their manager. And that should happen on a regular basis. I'll often say, we need to prioritize, calendarize, and agendize. And it's just a funny way of saying it to remember it, right? We got to prioritize, meaning it's important. We have to calendarize, meaning it's got to go in our calendar. It doesn't happen. But lastly, like you said, have an agenda. Like, what are the things I want to cover that are not project related, that are not task related, but are about them and their development. So great stuff, Pamela.
Yeah. I mean, focus on the person you're in there to learn about and how you're going to motivate them. In those conversations, it's really not about us on the leadership side. It's about them.
All about them. That's exactly right. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone.